Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to episode 4 of AJTV. Now, first of all, it is freezing in here and I have a killer headache. Tia is actually helping with both. And my chicken mug. Um, but despite multiple technical issues last week, or 2 weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago now, I figured a lot of stuff out, and not only is this episode gonna have more uh, clean technical stuff, but I also learned a few tricks, so hopefully that'll be cool. And also, you just go back to the title screen. Look at that awesome logo. My buddy Bill Parks did this for me. Shout out to him. I think it's pretty badass. I mean, it doesn't have a cartoon of me with a Star City patterned background and everything, but I think it's pretty sweet. Plus, I can do this with it. Yeah, turn it into like StarCraft mode. Maybe just, oh wow, put it into Star Wars mode. And speaking of StarCraft, I actually went to MLG Orlando last weekend. It was so much fun. Fan of StarCraft or Counter-Strike or Halo, you should definitely try and get yourself to one of those. Today we're going to be talking about a game from the, I think, second best player in the world. I don't know, I don't really like comparing players that much, but he's amazing, indisputably, and that is Yuuya Watanabe. As you know, recently he went back-to-back winning 2 different Grand Prix, and the second of which was, I think he went like second place, first, or something ridiculous like that after his run a few years ago of like 6 Premier Event top 8s in a row. The guy's really good, is what I'm saying. What we're going to do today, instead of thinking of like taking a concept and then showing a bunch of games and that illustrate that concept, that theory, to sort of like really pound the knowledge home, through example. What we're going to do today is look at one game, or actually one match, and uh, expand upon that for all of the things that come out of that one game. It's going to be the finals of GP Pittsburgh, brought to us by GG's Live, and Yuuya just plays fantastically. So let's look at that. Before we begin, let's go over to the deck lists for a moment. Now, I don't want to focus too hard on the deck lists because obviously the format rotated, but I actually like that. I want to talk about the technical side of the play rather than, specific card interactions or things about the build. But what you should note for this match particular is that if I go into John Madden mode with my pen here, there are actually no Day of Judgments anywhere in the list at all. And that's pretty significant against Tempered Steel. For the people who aren't aware, Yuuya went really aggressive, shaved a land from most builds, and played way more creatures and way more aggressive cards in Splicer and the Third Sword, and things like Spell Pierce that were being shaved out of some of the other lists. Yeah, we'll come back to this when we need to, but just something to remember that he actually has no Day of Judgments in his deck, which is pretty significant for this matchup. A lot of people thought that he was going to have some trouble, and we'll see how he dealt with it. Let's go into the game. So, Yuuya wins the roll. Both players keep their 7. And we started off pretty standardly. Now, the thing about this matchup is that the Tempered Steel deck only has a certain number of cards that you actually have to worry about. Uh, the rest of them are just kind of like random dudes. Like a Legionnaire, Porcelain Legionnaire can actually do some damage, but besides that, everything's like Vault Scourges and Glint Hawks and um, Memnites and Signal Pests. You know, things that aren't actually good cards. They're actually quite weak, um, but they turn into relevant cards once you have a Tempered Steel or a Steel Overseer. So those are the things to sort of keep in control. Now, Yuuya has the Hawk, searches up 2 because he was on the play, goes up to 7 cards. And Lucas has a pretty explosive draw, but you know, he didn't have the Mox Opal into Tempered Steel God draw. It's just really solid. 3 dudes followed by a Steel Overseer. Now here comes the first really key turn. All right. This is Yuuya's turn 3 on the play, and how he handles this is just beautiful. We're actually going to watch this turn multiple times, so I'll just shut up and let you watch it once. All right, come back to my face. Now, the turn was unbelievable mastery on multiple levels. It might not seem like much, but let's walk through it. So, oops, forgot to rewind. So first of all, we see the Steel Overseer come down for Lucas. Now, if this thing goes active, we basically lose. Without Wraths, there's no way to reset this. So if this thing even gets 1 activation, we're in deep trouble. Now, as Yuuya flashes through his hand, now he plays his land first. That's good. We're going to come back to that. But look, he shuffles a Dismember to the front of his hand. It's blurry there, but I guarantee you it's a Dismember. Now, what he does, despite having that Dismember, is he leads with Preordain. Alright, he drew a Spell Pierce for the turn, and is going to Dismember the Steel Overseer, or he'll lose to it. So, rather than Dismember and hold the Preordain, and leave up 2 mana, which makes Mana Leak an option, so then Lucas probably won't play a Tempered Steel if he has it, into 2 mana, but he might into 1 into the Spell Pierce. So if you go Preordain, then Dismember, then you leave up 1 mana for the Spell Pierce, and you can tag the Tempered Steel if it comes down. The reason normally I like holding Preordains, but this is an obvious spot to spend it. Not only for the reason I just mentioned, but also because Yuuya does not have a 4th land, so it's very obvious what he needs. Now what we're going to see is he actually finds a Dismember off of the Preordain. And this is why you Preordain first. Now, some people, they have their Dismember, they put the other one on the bottom looking for a land. But instead, not only does Yuuya keep the Dismember on top to deal with the Steel Overseer, but he casts it off the top of his deck. Look at how he does this. Looks at the 2 cards, puts 1 on top, 1 on bottom, taps a mana, and flips the card over from the top of his deck. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Now, what he's done is said, wow, I really needed an answer to that Steel Overseer. Good thing I preordained into it, when he had another one in his hand the whole time. It's Not that he kept his second dismember, because that's just correct. Like the 4 damage you're going to take from the dismember is going to be less damage than you would take from a creature. Period. So it's correct to keep it. Even without the 4th land, I think it's correct to keep it. Because he still has lots of things to do with the Spell Pierce and the Dismember and the Hawks in the meantime. But also if he has if Lucas has another Steel Overseer, then you absolutely need that second Dismember to deal with it. So it's correct to keep the Dismember. And I think that a decent portion of people would keep the Dismember, but very few would play it from the top of their deck. That's really key. So what he's doing by playing it off the top of his deck is he's saying, I do not have a Dismember in my hand. I do not have an answer for that Steel Overseer in my hand. I needed to preordain into it, and I hit. Lucky, lucky me. Not only does this mask the Dismember in his hand, but it also works well with his mana. First of all, let's go back to the start of the turn one more time. Untaps, draws a Spell Pierce, plays his third land, his only land, before preordaining. Normally this is really, really bad, but why is it right in this situation? It's your third land, and it's a Seachrome Coast. No matter what land you hit off the top of your deck, you are going to play the Seachrome Coast for turn. That is just going to happen. But the fact that he plays it first, because he knows that no matter what he hits off his preordain, this land is coming down, it masks his hand even more. What we're going to see is his distribution, or his use of his mana is really solid. Preordain, have one for Dismember and one for Spell Pierce on any potential Glinthawk Idols or Tempered Steels. Dismembers from the top, which not only masks his Dismember, but the fact that he was like, whew, Dismember you. Good thing I had it, or good thing I hit it. The fact that this land was already in play makes this untapped mana really inconspicuous. If he didn't play his land first, goes preordain, Dismember, think for a while, put 1/1, show Dismember, then play a land. It says, what was he think? One of the things he could have been thinking about. Why was he thinking about the Dismember? Obviously, he's going to keep it to deal with the Steel Overseer because we know he doesn't have one in his hand. Hint, hint. But what could he be thinking about with the other card? He's either thinking about the other card, whether to put that under the Dismember or at the bottom, or he's thinking about what land to play from, or what the rest of his turn looks like. Now, when he plays his land first, he preordains, hit Dismember, I cast Dismember immediately because that's what I need to do to survive, and then it's not suspicious that he has a mana up. It's a really, 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 really small thing. And since it's a Seachrome Coast, if you think about it hard enough, it actually doesn't matter at all. But I guarantee you that if he were to play that land after the Dismember, that mana would register in his opponent's mind a little more. He's a little more likely to play around a Spell Pierce if he were to play a Tempered Steel in the next turn. It's so small, but really the big play there was revealing the Dismember from the top of his deck. Lucky, lucky me, I found an answer. Now here's a scary moment. Contested Warzone comes down, and Yuuya is facing down a lot of damage. Now, he's thinking here, which bothers me a little, just because I think it could give away Spell Pierce Dismember. The only thing that he could possibly give away by thinking here with 1 mana is that he has both Spell Pierce and Dismember, right? And I think that he's done a good enough job of convincing his opponent he doesn't have a Dismember, so he doesn't have to worry about this. But this is something that scared me a little. But I recognize that what he's actually thinking about is not blocking, dismembering, attacking back, and stealing the war zone, which he considers and doesn't do, and I agree with him there. But so as you can see, without Steel Overseer or Tempered Steel, uh, this Tempered Steel deck is very bad, like comically bad. He's literally attacking with 3 1/1s. Like he's trading a card for a quarter of a card in Squadron Hawk. That's downright embarrassing. He's forcing through 4 damage, but Yuuya can still just trade away all of his Hawks. Now Yuuya misses another land drop here, but he only has one option: Hawk, go. Now, because of the fact that his Spell Pierce and Dismember were masked from before, this 1 mana left open is still just not suspicious at all. So if Lucas were to draw a Plains if he has a Tempered Steel in hand, or a Tempered Steel if he has a White Source in hand, he would most likely slam it and get it pierced. And what we're going to see instead is a pretty fantastic series of events. Lucas tanks pretty hard here because he has a contested war zone that he's thinking about whether or not he should play it. There's actually like no chance that playing this is correct. Just because like you attack for 6, and then he steals 2 of your lands and plays a Hawk, and then you're like not you can't do anything. But if you're just gonna attack with 2 of them, it's a pretty easy block here. Now he's trading another full card for another quarter of a card and 2 damage. And here is where the magic happens. Play Glinthawk. Snap Dismember. Lucas embarrassingly shuffles the Inkmoth Nexus in his hand to the front, bins both his creatures, shamefully plays the land. Now, it's really easy to just be like, what an idiot! I can't believe how bad he played. That's so elementary. Like I'm sure almost everyone watching live did. But you have to remember, that wasn't a random mistake. That wasn't like, ooh, brain fart, you know. The only thing that could matter at all there is if he had exactly the second Dismember. Look here. He only has 2 Dismembers. He has to have exactly that second Dismember. And he's already told his opponent he didn't have one. He already showed Lucas his hand, and there was not a Dismember to be seen, when in fact he did have it. Had it the whole time. So it's again, it's easy to say, wow, that was a horrible play, and it was. But you gotta give props. You gotta give respect where it's deserved. Yuuya absolutely forced that mistake out of Lucas, and with his masterful play, and was rewarded. It's also a good point to realize that he hadn't spent the dismember yet. If you remember, Lucas traded one creature for 4 damage and a quarter of a card, and then one creature for 2 damage and a quarter of a card. If Yuuya just dismembers, so he takes 6 total. If Yuuya just dismembers one of the creatures, then he's trading one creature for 4 life and a card, and then one creature for 2 life and a quarter of a card. Yeah. Basically, it would have been profitable for Yuuya to have dismembered, but not as profitable as it could be. This is what maximizing the value of your cards means, right? He waited until it was big mouse, little mouse. He waited until he could get maximum value off of it. Imagine if Lucas had drawn, say, a Steel Overseer instead of this Glinthawk. That would have been more value than dismembering one of the 1/1s. I know a lot of people would be in that spot, would be like, oh my gosh, he's an aggressive deck. I lose 4 life from this. I need to protect my life total. Even more people would be good enough to do the calculation of, from that creature, I'm going to take a total of X damage. That amount of damage is greater than 4, thus it's profitable for me to dismember. Fewer people, though, would say, yeah, it would be profitable to dismember, but I can do better. So after this brutal 2-for-1, yeah, like, if Lucas just, for those who don't get it, if Lucas just plays this Inkmoth Nexus before this happens, then if Yuuya were to dismember, he could activate his Inkmoth Nexus with his Inkmoth Nexus, turns into an artifact, and he could bounce that, save his Glinthawk. Instead, he loses a Memnite and a Glinthawk. Draws his 4th land, comes into play tapped, and he plays a Hawk. Here is kind of a cool turn. So, Lucas attacks with both his Inkmoth Nexuses. And yes, it is Nexuses. I'm actually not that big of a forceful grammar guy, but using the wrong plural, big pet peeve of mine. It's Nexus can be the plural of itself, or Nexuses, not Nexi. But okay, so he attacks with his Nexuses, and it's easy to say he has 2 Nexuses. I have 2 Hawks, one in hand, one in play. I can trade straight up, and he'll have nothing left. The thing is, neither will Yuuya. At that point, it's very possible that Yuuya just draws, like, counters that don't do anything, spells he can't cast, and, like, maybe a land that comes into play tapped on the last turn. You know, he just, like, hits a bunch of bricks, while Lucas draws, like, Steel Overseer, Vault Scourge, Porcelain Legionnaire, Dispatch, or whatever. You know, like, a series of solid cards. He doesn't even need that. If he draws, like, running Porcelain Legionnaires, Yuuya just dies. So, the fact that he is just taking this, I like a lot. And I think that a decent amount of people would get it right. But it's worth pointing out that, I mean, at this point, 2 poison is pretty irrelevant, but having this hawk in play is huge. Yuuya actually has a Sword of Feast and Famine in his hand, so if he were to draw an untapped land, he can. Oh, and he has a Gideon, I think. He can like sword, equip, hit you, get rid of your last card, play Gideon, plus it, go, and the game basically ends. Um, and he steals the thingy, the contested war zone. But even if he doesn't draw a land, as we're gonna see, he can continue to progress his board because 2 poison a turn is not a clock he's afraid of. So he immediately takes the 2 poison. And Lucas passes. He draws Gideon. Maybe he didn't have Gideon and he just drew Gideon. Either way, now he has a Gideon. Oh, another thing about that last turn. Boop, 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 boop. Here, um, technically, it's possible for Lucas to attack with 1 Nexus and leave back 1 Nexus to try and trade for the Hawk and protect his war zone. The reason I like attacking with both is because if you just attack with one, you leave Yuuya the option to just block it. Like, he could block it, not take anything, and then the next turn just, like, play another Hawk and pass, and then Lucas didn't get anywhere. By attacking with both, like, either he takes it and you've started to poison him out, and he can't block both Nexuses in the same turn, so you're going to keep trading the war zone, or he blocks one of them, and then you've traded anyway, but dealt him a poison along the way. You really limit the Cobblade players' options here by attacking with both the Nexuses. So I just wanted to point that out. So sure enough, Yuuya attacks and takes the war zone. Now his hand is like Spell Pierce, Gideon, Sword, Hawk, and I think a second Spell Pierce. It's very, very tempting to play a Hawk here. Mostly because he taking 2 poison is scary. You can actually, like with this Hawk, you can trade 1 poison for 1 damage in this contested cliffs for a while until you draw another land and then Gideon wins you the game. Um, but that's not 100% win. That's like a 99% win, and Yuuya, that's not good enough for Yuuya. So he neglects to play the Hawk, instead choosing to advance his board with the sword. Now you put Lucas to the test. Another reason that Yuuya can get away with this play is because Lucas doesn't have any artifacts. So in order to metalcraft a dispatch, he would have to like play an artifact and turn his nexuses into artifacts and then dispatch. At which point Yuuya can simply spell pierce and kill him. If Lucas had a couple artifacts, like if he had a Mox and I don't know, uh, a Signal Pest, then I'd be more hesitant to attack, I'd be more hesitant to play the sword rather than the Hawk. But for that reason, I really like playing the sword there. Lucas has pretty much no choice but to attack with both of his nexuses. He draws a third, so he's going to try and poison Yuuya out before the sword gives him too much of an advantage. There's no reason to block a sworded Hawk with a nexus. Like, it's going to hit you eventually. So just let it hit you while getting in as much poison as you can. I mean, at this point, we know that Lucas is pretty much dead. But if Yuuya had a bunch of bricks, like if his hand was, leak, pierce, pierce, Hawk, then it's not inconceivable that Yuuya gets poisoned out. Especially because we know Lucas's last card in hand is a second contested war zone. He's playing to his outs here. Now, even if Yuuya didn't draw this land, Lucas is dead. He can play a hawk, equip this hawk, attack, get rid of Lucas's card. I think he has 2 in hand. Get rid of one of Lucas's 2 cards. Take control of the war zone. It untaps from the sword. Play Gideon, plus it, and that's a game-ending sequence. He ends up drawing a land, so it doesn't matter. Oh, also, if Lucas had kept up mana, then Yuuya simply doesn't play this hawk. He would just equip an attack to leave up spell pierces for any potential dispatches. But since Lucas is tapped out, he gets to use a little extra mana. Gets in with the sword. Oh, Lucas has 3 cards, actually. Excuse me. Pitches a Mox. Steal your war zone. Explain to the judge that I do indeed know how the stack works. Yuuya's English is not that great. He can get basic ideas across, but he's not up to Shuhei or Minamura in their their conversational English is actually quite good. I love Yuuya, and the couple times I've had extended conversations with him, I've needed Shuhei or Saito to translate. And if you don't know the language, explaining active player, non-active player, app-nap triggers, I can imagine that being somewhat difficult. So he just wanted to make sure that everyone knew he was doing it right. Sure enough, plays Gideon. Lucas looks at another card for funsies, and I think he packs it up here. Yep, sure enough. Give me my war zone back. It's not yours. So wow, Yuuya's really good at Magic. I think there's 3 things I want to look at, or that I wanted to look at in that game. One, we'll go reverse order, because that happens to also be order of importance, I think. There's the playing sword instead of hawk. I like that for the reasons given, and I think that a decent number of people would blindly play a hawk to avoid taking poison, but Yuuya is obviously a master of using his life total or his poison status as a resource. 2, playing the sword instead of the second hawk. This kind of goes in line with 3, or with 1, where when you're going to play the sword, then it's correct to not block. Like, his plays worked together. So many people will make the correct technical play one turn and then make what they believe to be the correct technical play the next turn, but those 2 plays will have contradicting strategies behind them. Like, they'll play around a pump spell in limited. They'll play around a pump spell that would blow them out on this turn, but then 3 turns later they'll make an attack that is technically correct to force through the most damage and give your opponent the least amount of blocks, unless they have the pump spell that you were just playing around. There's this disconnect in strategy so many times that it's important to watch a game plan kind of it's a simple game plan, and it takes the place over 2 turns, well, 3 if you count the attack, but the fact that all his decisions lined up, I think that's really important to look at. And then obviously get my pillow, obviously the most important part is we should all stand in awe of the dismember. In fact, we're going to watch it one more time just because it was so brutally sexy. Here comes the Steel Overseer. Watch how Yuuya handles his cards here. Plays his land first. Even though we as we get more competitive, we get into the habit of sort of doing things, especially preordained, before we play our land, so that we have the most information available to us before we make any decisions. But uh, it's important to not always think that way. This is just obviously correct. And there, he actually shuffles the dismember to the front of his hand. If you watch carefully, you can actually see him shuffle the dismember to the front of his hand and then decide to preordain first. He put the pieces together unbelievably quickly. And then the fact that he hits the dismember and knows exactly what to do with it with utmost confidence just flips it over. Mastery. That's all I can say. So let's fast forward to game 2. Game 2, here we go. Oops. Game 2. Oh man, my tea's getting cold. Lucas actually mulligans on the play, and as if Tempered Steel wasn't weak enough of a deck, it really does not mulligan well, and when it mulligans on the play, so it's really stuck on those 6 cards, it does not come out of it well. Now, turn 1 of the entire game is actually pretty surprisingly deep. Plains, Signal Pest, Mental Misstep it. Let's quickly cut over back to these deck lists. Now, if you look, Yuuya has 2 Mental Missteps. I don't know exactly how he boarded. I would actually think you would cut images, but I saw one on the bottom of his deck when he was shuffling, so he has at least one in his deck. But he does not have Timely Reinforcements. Timely Reinforcements is a card that many weaker Cobblade players will bring in against Tempered Steel, but it doesn't actually do anything. If they only have creatures, then you're gonna win anyway with Hawks and Angels and Gideons and Sun Titans. If they have creatures and oh, by the way, I just noticed this is supposed to be Steel Overseer. If they have creatures and an enabler, a Tempered Steel, or a Steel Overseer, then your 1/1 tokens from the Timely Reinforcements are basically useless. So people just go, oh, Tempered Steel's an aggressive deck. Timely Reinforcements is in my sideboard for aggressive decks. It should come in, and that's just wrong. Mental Misstep is a card that greatly depends on your opponent's Tempered Steel build whether or not it comes in. Personally, I almost never brought it in, but if you look at this list, he has 4 Dispatches, Glint Hawks, and Signal Pests. That's a decent number. And the reason I didn't bring it in is because they didn't always have Glint Hawk, and they didn't always have 4 Dispatch, especially post-board. Many had 3 main, and they could board them out. And Signal Pest most certainly should be boarded out. That is the biggest thing. They obviously exchange deck lists, so Yuuya knows that there's Glint Hawks and Dispatches, at the very least. And that's enough for two missteps. A Dispatch on a key creature on a key turn can actually be game-changing, and having the extra protection is definitely worth it. And the fact that it gets a Glint Hawk. But if we go back to the game real quick, Signal Pest is still in his deck. Now, as you saw, Signal Pest is still in his deck. That should not be the case. He First of all, look at how it matches up. I mean, Hawks eat it, Angels eat it. It doesn't really do anything on its own. You need like a bunch of creatures, and even though Yuuya does not have wraths, which is a real reason, like if they had wraths, then Signal Pest is even more comically bad. But even without wraths, it matches up poorly. Like if these cards just eat it, your other cards don't actually match up any better. Like your Ornithopter still gets eaten by an Emiria Angel, doesn't get past a Phantasmal Image, the Ornithopter. Um, Instead of getting eaten by two Hawks, it trades with one, I guess. But like Memnite still trades with a Hawk, gets eaten by Splicer and Emiria Angel. Legionnaire still gets past everything and still trades with a Blade Splicer token or a Phantasmal Image. Like none of your cards uh, pair up more favorably against their creatures because of the +1 power. So there's reason number one. Reason number two is if you look, Shrine is the card coming in. Now again, against standard Cobblade, Shrine is way, way better and Signal Pest is way, way worse. So it makes this direct swap a little more obvious. But even without Wraths, I think Shrine is really good. And Shrine and Signal Pest should basically never be in the same deck at the same time. Like, if you're bringing in Shrine, Signal Pest should come out. I would say 99% of the time. Uh, the reason is they just play completely differently. Signal Pest is a card where you're giving up a lot of resources. You're just throwing away a card to force through a little extra damage in the early game as you explode your board. Shrine, however, wants you to really nickel and dime them with a couple guys as you're trying to establish your Steel Hellkite. This should quite obviously be Steel Overseer. But you're trying to nickel and dime them with your Shrine, and you're trying to get one of your key spells to land. Now Shrine is a key spell as well, um, and sort of grinds them out. At a certain point when you get like I'd say the magic number is about five or six tokens on Shrine. There's not much that a Cobblade player can do. Even if they have Wraths, it's going to be pretty difficult. So yeah, these cards are just on completely opposite sides of the spectrum of how you want to play out the game, and thus I think that this is a pretty obvious direct swap. Cool. All right. Let's go back to the video. Oop. Video. Okay, so missed up your Signal Pest. Easy peasy. Now Yuya's hand here is like O-Ring Hawk lands. And while Yuya's tapped down, Lucas lands a Shrine. Another land for Yuya. Turn to Squadron Hawk, because anyone who's ever played against Cobblade knows that it is absolutely a lock that the deck starts with exactly one Squadron Hawk in hand. And since he misstepped, even though he's on the draw, he got to search up two Hawks. Standard, 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 standard. Very typical so far. Counter goes on the Shrine. And Lucas is going to play two creatures. A second Signal Pest and a Vault Scourge. Once again, I'd like to point out how comically bad Signal Pest is. Straight up just eat it with this hawk. This is a non-card right now. In fact, with hawk in hand, it's actually almost surprising that Yuuya bothered misstepping this one. But without an answer to a Steel Overseer, had this resolved and Lucas backed it up with a Steel Overseer, Yuuya would actually be in trouble, is the actual reason he missteps there. So I think Yuuya drew another land and played a hawk, searching up his last hawk. I actually would not have minded an attack here. If he attacks with both, like, you can take 2 damage and eat his guy. If he attacks with 1, then you just trade straight up like you would anyway. And if he has something like Tempered Steel, then you're not going to be able to block anyway. So I actually would have liked an attack there, but it's pretty minor. So Lucas, after missing a land drop last turn, actually had a Mox that he was slow rolling and lands a Tempered Steel. Gets in for 6 damage here. And follows it up with a Memnite that he drew. Now this is a scary situation. I actually have a special graphic. Alright, here is the board. Look, there's the board, 3, Tempered Steel, some stuff, blah blah blah. Here we go. Let's do life totals. 18, 22. Oh, he's at 22. I have the best handwriting. 22, 0 cards. And we are at 18. And this is our hand. And that's my sweet logo. And that's Star City Games. And this is the Modo background. Okay, so this is our hand. This is the board we're facing down. At this point, multiple people would declare our Japanese hero, our player of the year, our rookie of the year, completely drawing dead. But there are a couple of different lines, and they all revolve around the idea of trying to win rather than trying to not lose. Right now, we need both Lucas to probably mess up and to draw some gas in order to win this game. But if we don't put ourselves in a position where that's possible, by both making a good draw, maximizing the good draws that will get us back in it, and by putting Lucas in situations where he's more likely to make a mistake. So, what do you do here? Take a sip of my cold tea as you look it over. So, when I was watching this game, as I watch games, I try and sort of make the play based on what I can see in their hand, which isn't often that much. And just sort of compare it. When it's drastically different than what the player that is quite obviously better than me does, then I have a good learning opportunity. So here, my play was actually like Colonnade, O-ring your Tempered Steel. Now, what this does is You then, like, trade for these two guys, and then the next turn, like, I don't know, into the royal this, and then play a hawk or maybe kick it. Like, that play, despite it, you know, maximizing your mana and dealing with the number one threat, which is this Tempered Steel, it doesn't actually follow a game plan, right? It's just a play. It is a series of spells that you are casting, but it's not a sequence. Now what Yuuya ends up doing is absolutely brilliant. Is he goes land, hawk, go. Try and figure out what Yuuya's thinking here. Let's go back to the game. He tanks on it pretty hard, and he actually pulls the colonnade and the O-ring to the front of his hand. Look, if you look, the front, or actually right now that's a hawk, but like when he first picked up his hand, he shuffled the O-ring to the front, and then shuffled his hand around and shuffled the colonnade to the front, and the hawk got in between. But he actually strongly considered my play. I think that my play is the instinctive play. It's, oh my gosh, Tempered Steel, I'm gonna die to it. Kill it now. I have a thing that can kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it. I can even maximize my mana. This is perfect. Let's do that and then see what happens. What you have to remember is that Yuuya has no wraths. He only has one more O-ring. He has no real way to deal with a one-card army, an army in the can. Army in a can. An army in a can, in the form of the Shrine of Loyal Legions. The play that he does actually sets him up in a position where even if Lucas plays correctly, Yuuya can still win. And if Lucas messes up, then Yuuya's in a dominating position. How insane is that? Look at that board. He actually sets it up where the two options are Lucas messes up and I'm going to crush him, or Lucas doesn't mess up and then I have a lot of live draws. He's facing down a Shrine at 3, a Tempered Steel army, and he's totally fine. It's no big. Whatever, I'll handle it. I'm Yuuya Watanabe. So, he's going to play a land. Here's goes with the planes. Sorry, my little graphic. I played a Tech Edge. This is actually obviously better. Even after playing the land, he still thinks. You know? He's thinking about, like, into the roiling the shrine before it gets active, I guess. Or just not playing a hawk and then kicking the into the royal when he plays it on the Tempered Steel. But the thing about that is then he'd still be left with Lucas would still be left with a Tempered Steel and a creature and a shrine. By playing the hawk, he puts himself in a position to eat the whole army and leave Lucas with just a Tempered Steel in hand and the shrine in play, which then he can deal with. Look at that block. Can I just rewind? Look at how fast he blocks. He is elated to see this attack. Oh my god, you're attacking? I will block. Block this one and block that one and block that. No, yeah, don't let that single pest get away. Get that under the hawk. And then into the royals, the Tempered Steel. Now, first of all, I would like to point out, you know, LOL, nice signal pest. But not only does this play kill all of Lucas's army and leave him with a Squadron Hawk, LOL, but if Lucas didn't draw a 0 mana artifact or a land, then he cannot activate this shrine unless he does it now. The Mox gets turned off when these creatures die, and he won't actually have the third mana unless he drew a Memnite, an Ornithopter, which I assume he boarded out, since I don't know what else he would board out if not Signal Pests, and or a land. If he doesn't have one of those things in this one card that he peeled off the top, then he will not be able to activate his shrine unless he does so now. It's pretty funny how like calm Yuuya was being before, but now that his insidious plan is working, he's shuffling his hand like he's Brian Kibler. Or AJ Sacher. I actually shuffle my hand a lot. It's actually kind of a bad habit. I'm not quite as good at Kibler as Kibler is, so I've dropped a couple cards in embarrassing situations. Now, presumably, Lucas is thinking about cracking this shrine. Presumably. Now, he lets it resolve, which now I'm going to point out one more awesome thing. As soon as we get off of the player's faces. Look at that dreamboat. Okay, now even if Lucas had drawn a land or 0 mana artifact to turn on this Mox, he would not pass and activate the shrine and then the next turn play Tempered Steel and attack for 12, because then Yuuya would have mana up to counter the Tempered Steel. If you remember the way that this game played out, at no point could Yuuya have played a counterspell except on exactly turn 3, or exactly turn 4, Lucas's turn 3, when Yuuya had 1 mana up. If he had exactly Spell Pierce on exactly that turn, he could have pierced the Tempered Steel. But other than that, there's been no opportunity for Yuuya to counter any spell all game. That means Lucas can pretty reasonably put Watanabe on some sort of counter magic, potentially. Which means that he doesn't want to risk losing his Tempered Steel by playing it next turn for maximum damage. Instead, he's going to play Grindy. Why is he playing Grindy? Because he has a Shrine in play. And he's going to play the Tempered Steel now, replay the Tempered Steel now, put an extra bonus counter on the Shrine, go to his turn and put another counter on the Shrine, and then sacrifice it for 6 guys instead of 4 guys now. Now, why is that significant? Because if he had played a land or an Ornithopter and the Tempered Steel, then Yuuya Oblivion Rings the Shrine and wins the game, facing down either a Memnite and a Tempered Steel, or a land, a Tempered Steel, and no hand. Either way, Lucas has no hand. I like those spots, personally. So, it's not like if he didn't have a thing there, or if he did have a thing there, then Yuuya wouldn't be able to O-ring the Shrine. It's just that if he had a mana source there, then Tempered Steel would be in play instead of in his hand, and he still gets to O-ring the Shrine. Now, even if Lucas made the correct play with perfect information, because I think with the information he has, he played it correctly to not activate Shrine, play the Idol, the next turn you can activate the idol, or you can like play Tempered Steel, activate the idol. Shrine gets 3 more counters, one for next turn, one for Tempered Steel, one for the turn after, because that's the turn you would activate it, and you get in for 4, a third of his life total. Um, I actually like the way he played it for the information that he has. But if he knew Yuuya's hand, which is no counter magic, an Oblivion Ring, and lands, Yuuya is completely flooded with just an O-Ring, no counter magic. Then Lucas can activate Shrine, get 4 guys, next turn, play Tempered Steel, and attack for 12. Even in that worst case scenario for Yuuya, if somehow he accidentally dropped his hand on the table like I do, then Yuuya's not even dead. Because of the Signal Pest letting this Hawk live, and Yuuya has a second Hawk in hand, he plays that Hawk, Lucas attacks for 12, Yuuya has to chump with 1, and then if he draws like a Blade Splicer, then he goes O-Ring your Tempered Steel, Blade Splicer, and has Hawk Blade Splicer token against 4 1/1s at 3 life. That's a pretty good spot. So, worst case scenario, if Lucas played perfectly in a way that there's no possible way he could know that that's what he's supposed to do, unless he cold read exactly Yuuya's hand, then even in that worst case scenario, Yuuya can still draw out of it. But in reality, the 2 lines of play that Lucas had, the 2 reasonable lines of play that Lucas could have had, Yuuya ends up crushing in both of them. Even from that extremely disadvantageous position, Yuuya had this game locked the whole way. And look, he draws yet another land. Yuuya has been unbelievably flooded all game, but because of his sequencing, because of his patience and his ability to think through how the next turn was going to play out, and from the fact that Lucas has Signal Pests in his deck instead of literally anything else, Yuuya pulls ahead drastically. There was actually a cool thing. Yeah, I like not attacking there. Yuuya's totally fine trading with this. Getting in 1 point doesn't really matter. Yuuya at this point has to draw like an Emiria Angel or a Sun Titan or a Gideon, and then he wins the game. Or a Preordain at this point. Or at any point, Preordain's awesome. I don't like that attack from Lucas. It doesn't actually matter because Yuuya draws a Emiria Angel, and Lucas is drawing dead because not only does he have a fetch land, but his last 2 cards in hand are land. So, kind of an anticlimactic ending. Let's go back to my beautiful face. At the next turn, Yuuya ended up drawing like Sun Titan anyway, like getting back the fetch land, making 2 more birds, and Lucas extended the hand. But yeah, Yuuya's really good at Magic. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was kind of a newer approach, as I said at the beginning, instead of having an idea and using a bunch of games to support it, we had a game and then we learned a bunch of things from it. Yeah, that's what happened. Next week, I think I'm going to have a written article instead of a video. And the week after, I'm going to try and do a video. I'm not sure on what yet, but hopefully it'll be pretty good. Some people have been asking for like a way to ask me questions. Actually, the Day 9 Daily, which is the inspiration behind AJTV, He actually does the show live, and so he can ask his 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 like little IRC chat um, for any questions and answers them live. Since I don't do mine live because I'm not as confident of a person as the illustrious Day 9, I think that maybe for like episode 7 ish, I'll I'll throw it out to the viewers and answer some questions. Maybe in the from the Facebook forums on StarCityGames.com or on Twitter. We'll see. I'll let you know. But start gathering questions now, and I'll do my best to answer them in the near future. Until then, adios. Go to my little outro screen. Got my YouTube, got my Twitter. Thank you for watching. StarCityGames.com. I'll be in Baltimore this weekend, which is last weekend by the time you see this, and Kansas City the weekend after, and Vegas the weekend after. If you're going to any of those events, I will see you there. Otherwise, see you next week.